Welcome to the Just Ingredients podcast. I'm Cara Lynn, and here we talk all things nourishing to the mind, body, and soul. This is a place where you can find just good ingredients to life. Welcome back, everyone. I am so excited for my guest today. I have Dr. Carrie Jones with me. She is an internationally recognized speaker, consultant, and educator on the topic of women's health and hormones. Dr. Jones graduated from the National University of Natural Medicine, where she also completed a 2-year residency in women's health, hormones, and endocrinology. Later, she graduated with a Master's of Public Health. Recently, Dr. Jones became board certified through the American Board of Naturopathic Endocrinology. While in practice, Dr. Jones served as medical director for 2 large integrative clinics, and she is currently the medical director for Precision Analytical, which a lot of you guys probably know does the Dutch test, which is a great test for hormones. So welcome. Thank you. Gosh. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. I so appreciate this. And I just remembered, I have your dry shampoo in my hair right now.
Oh, you do? Yeah. Well, I actually saw on Instagram that you were trying 2 different types of dry shampoo. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I need to mail her one of my dry shampoos. So that's awesome.
When it came back in stock, I think you put a message up or something on Instagram. And I was like, purchase.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I hope you like it.
I do. I like it a lot. This, I think, is the 3rd or 4th time I've tried it. So all my friends are like, tell me what you think. We're looking for dry shampoos too.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you. Well, I tell everybody that you are the hormone expert. Anytime someone asks about hormones, I'm like, go follow Dr. Carrie Jones. She'll teach it all. So let's just delve right into hormones, because it is a favorite question that I get from followers all the time, everything about hormones. So let's start with the basics. I get a lot of followers who say, oh my gosh, I think my hormones are off. Mm-hmm. What do I do about this hormonal imbalance? And sometimes I do laugh because I'm like, well, there's so many hormones.
Yeah, which one?
Which one are you talking about? But I think they're not talking... Well, I think they're talking estrogen, progesterone, you know, those. So
yeah.
Why do you think people, especially in women, their hormones are so off these days? What do you suggest to them? What do you think's contributing to this?
Good thing we have an hour. The thing with hormones is, well, first I'll tell everyone what a hormone is. So a hormone is basically a chemical messenger. It's like a text message. It's what it is. It's a messenger. And so the brain is the master controller ultimately for all of our hormones, whether it's thyroid hormone, whether it's your ovarian hormones, which think estrogen, progesterone, also some testosterone, think your adrenal hormones. So think cortisol, think adrenaline, think DHEA. And so the brain coordinates all this. And then once the hormone goes out, what they do is they bind to little receptors like a lock and key, and it turns them on and you know, or opens the door or activates it, you know, Wonder Twins activate. And so when your hormones are choreographed to be released in a particular way, at a particular time, at a particular part of the month, then everything's great. It's like an orchestra. It sounds great. It sounds in tune. You know, all the sections are doing what they're supposed to do. But when the orchestra is out of tune, if the brain is not able to communicate, if the gland like the ovaries or the adrenals or the thyroid is not receiving, if maybe it's too much or too little, that's when we get all the symptoms. That's when women start to say, I feel like my hormones are off. And I would agree. I'd say when they say that, most of the time they mean the 2 hormones, estrogen, right, and they mean progesterone. And boy, because it's a communication between the brain up top, you know, and the ovaries sort of in our abdominal area, that's a long way to go. And a lot can get in the way. A lot can interfere. Everything from, I mean, even just stress, the stress of the last year. A lot of women have said, gosh, my cycles are weird. My PMS is worse. My periods are heavier. I skipped a cycle. I'm a week early. Like, what is going on? And the hormones, cortisol for stress, can affect your hormones like estrogen and progesterone. So there's a lot that goes into what's sort of screwing up the whole pattern, the whole cycle, the whole orchestra.
Right.
Yeah.
So stress is a huge one. I know nutrition plays a part. I know
nutrition plays a part. Ingredients, which is why I love following you so much. The endocrine disruptors, that all those hormones from the brain down to all the different glands, that's actually called our endocrine system. Like we have an immune system, we have an endocrine system, and the endocrine system doesn't like to be disrupted. And what happens is we have all these chemicals that are known as endocrine disruptors, and they swoop in and they pretend, they act like particularly estrogen. So even if your body is doing great, the orchestra sounds great, everything's where it's supposed to be, when the endocrine disruptors swoop in, they bind to these receptors like a close enough key into a lock, and still turns it on, still opens the door, still screws stuff up. And so your own production could be just fine. Your own system could be just fine, but these chemicals come in and
mess them up.
Yep.
I love that analogy of the lock and key because that's a perfect image. I talk about endocrine disruptors quite often on my site because women use so many of them. People don't realize that they're in their body lotion and their body wash and, makeup. And I mean, the list goes on, and feminine products and our plastic and so many different things. So I love that you touch upon that it is actually really important for women to be aware of what chemicals they're putting in their body that can be mimicking this estrogen.
And it's scary because we don't really have quality testing for it. So women will say, gosh, I have all these estrogen symptoms. My breasts are big and heavy, or my periods are heavy or crampy or clotty. I grow fibroids. I have endometriosis, whatever it is. But I got my hormones checked and they looked pretty normal. What could that be? Like, well, unfortunately, plastics, phthalates, parabens, fertilizers, pesticides, they look kind of like estrogen, but not exactly. They're not twinning. Therefore, on testing, we're picking up estrogen. We're not picking up pesticide and, phthalate or bisphenol, BPA. Like, that stuff doesn't come through because it doesn't look exactly like estrogen. We're only looking for estrogen. So it's confusing to women who go, I have all the symptoms, but but my estrogen looks good.
When I read that on one of your posts, I actually did not realize that it didn't show up in estrogen testing. And I was floored. I was like, oh my gosh, that is the answer, because so many people claim they have like estrogen dominance, but like you said, we'll go to the doctor and it's all fine. And then they're frustrated. And so when I read that, I was like, that makes 100%. Yeah. 100% sure.
Huge.
Exactly. Okay, so let's talk about symptoms and estrogen, especially with cycles. I get a lot of people that write in like, I have horrible PMS, I've got heavy cramping, all the stuff that women have to deal with, but shouldn't have to deal with. Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be horrible cramping and heavy bleeding, and that's not right.
Right.
So, okay. Are the symptoms for someone that have problems the first 14 days of their symptom different than, is something going on hormonally that's different than the last 14 days of women that have symptoms?
Yes. So the first day you get your period, the first day you actually bleed, that's considered day 1. And then as we hedge closer, we move along, we get closer to ovulation, which is generally in the middle of our cycle. Ish, for ease sake, let's just say it's day 14 if you have a 28-day cycle. So once you release the egg, that's ovulation, then you start to make the hormone progesterone. So in the first part of your cycle, you're very estrogen heavy. It's normal. Estrogen's a preparer. It's a grower. It's like, just in case you get pregnant, I'm going to start making things fluffy in the uterus and like hospitable and like ready just in case you want to get pregnant. Like, I don't want to get pregnant. I'm not looking to get pregnant, but I know as someone who has a regular menstrual cycle, this is what happens. Once you ovulate, now progesterone comes out and sort of finishes it off. There's the refining details, and progesterone's also calming, it's soothing, it's relaxing, it keeps us in a good mood. Like, we like progesterone. But if you don't ovulate, if you don't release the egg, you're not going to make progesterone. And if you release the egg, but the cells that are responsible for making progesterone aren't the greatest quality, then instead of like pumping out estrogen, you kind of like eke out estrogen. It's like, eek. It's a little bit comes out, right? And so what happens is we get this imbalance between how much progesterone you should have and how much estrogen you actually have. And so a lot of women will hear it called estrogen dominance. And what we really mean is, in that second 14 days, your progesterone that should be big and robust and calming you and helping you sleep and feeling good isn't. And estrogen's sort of dominating at that point. And now we're like PMSing, we have tender boobs, and we have heavy periods and clots and all the things that are common, but not normal. Women ideally should not be experiencing all of these things like we do. And so it's that sort of ratio, that imbalance between the two causes the problems in the second half.
So in the second half, it could be low progesterone.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And you may have normal levels of estrogen. You may do a blood test or a urine test or a saliva test, and you're like, but my estrogen's totally in range. It is, but compared to progesterone, estrogen's winning. And that's why we get symptoms.
Okay. So what do you suggest to these women that all write in wanting help with those, day 25, 26, where they're just miserable?
Well, so the first thing I recommend is testing. Like, let's see for sure where everything is, and not just looking at estrogen and progesterone, but checking a few other markers as well. Like checking cortisol, which we just talked about. Cortisol can suppress or push down ovulation. Therefore, it's going to affect your progesterone. Checking your blood sugar, your glucose, and your insulin. Checking your thyroid markers. These all actually have a direct impact on whether or not you release the egg and make the progesterone every month. So I want a kind of a bigger snapshot of what's going on, because there's women will say, oh, I have low progesterone, I'll just take progesterone. I'm like, well, but we don't know why you have low progesterone. Like, let's backtrack and figure out like what's going on in your life that's causing you to have low progesterone. Maybe you just got off the birth control pill. Maybe you have an IUD, the Mirena, which can lower progesterone, lower ovulation. Maybe, you've got a thyroid problem. You've got either a really big thyroid problem or like kind of a sort of pseudo half thyroid problem. Either way, it's going to affect your ovulation. So that's the first thing that I recommend women do. And a lot of women know they have issues, but especially this last year, they haven't gone to the doctor, right? Like nobody's really leaving their home. So it's becoming more challenging. But now, as we're sort of moving through the pandemic, I'm like, be your own advocate and ask for some of these markers on yourself. Now, when you test, remember we said that these things happen in the second half of your cycle. So make sure you get your testing done in the second half of your cycle. If you have a 28-day cycle, ideally you want to test roughly around day 19, day 20 or 21. Again, we're trying to go for that progesterone, and that's where it lives. That's where it hangs out. If you test in the beginning, if you test, during your period or on day 10, day 11, you may be at the complete wrong part of your cycle, and that's not going to give you much information. So First thing is test. Second thing is test on the right day.
So a couple days after ovulation, actually.
5 to 7 days after you think you've ovulated, or you've done in what's called an ovulation predictor kit, which a lot of women are maybe familiar with. Just maybe they've done it for fertility purposes. They do this. Right. It's a urine test, right? You pee on it in the morning, and when it's positive, you're likely to ovulate the next day or two. So yeah.
Okay. So with all your reasonings of hormones being off, I also want to throw in that I tell people hormones are sometimes the first thing to go, because if your body needs to survive, it can survive without your hormones being balanced. And so it can be as easy as like gut issues. You've got gut issues going on. Therefore, your body is focusing on that and your hormones have gone by the wayside.
100%. I tell women that the brain is constantly surveying to see if you're safe enough and healthy enough to become pregnant. Whether you want to become pregnant or not, like you always have the potential, and often always have the potential. And so if you have inflammation, like gut, if you have a lot of gut issues going on, it's possible it's enough inflammation, enough stress on the body that the body's like, oh, not this month. Let's not ovulate this month, and let's not make progesterone this month, which from a safety, don't get pregnant standpoint is maybe the best thing for your body. Let's put the fire out first. But from a symptom point of view, like we get slammed. We get, then our PMS is bad that month, and we're moody, and our periods are heavier, and our cramps are worse. It's not fair.
Let's actually talk about cramps really quick, because I know your last few posts have been about cramps. Mm-hmm. And like you've said, heavy, hard, painful cramps should not be the normal thing.
Yeah.
So what can you suggest to girls that do have those?
Yeah. So I'll tell you what cramps are caused by, because some people want to know, like, is it estrogen that causes cramps? Technically, it's these things called prostaglandins, and they cause spasms. Think of prostaglandins go up like with labor. So if you are pregnant and you're giving labor and you have contractions, those contractions are caused by prostaglandins on a much smaller scale. That's why we get menstrual cramps, because these same prostaglandins squeeze and it causes cramps. Now, unfortunately, though, a lot of things can trigger these cramps to get worse, like being in that sort of estrogen dominant state perpetuates the cramp situation. And so now we're looking at, again, reading labels, which your expertise, making sure you're pulling out or switching out all those things that have estrogen-like chemicals in them so we don't perpetuate the cramps. Reducing inflammation, like what you eat, what you drink. I've had several comments from women who said they got rid of vegetable oils. They stopped using canola oil and safflower oil. They cut it all out of their diet and it helped immensely. I've had other women write in to say I added in like fish oil and evening primrose oil and some olive oil. And like just that switch alone has made a world of difference. The GI tract, your intestines, and your uterus are right next to each other. So if you do have GI stuff, if you have gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, you have candida, you've been told you have parasites, whatever it is, then when the intestinal tract is irritated, inflamed, that can cross over and irritate and inflame the uterus as well. And then progesterone, making sure, which is a little bit of a multi-step process, but, get tested, see where your progesterone is, work with somebody to help get that estrogen progesterone balance back, help make sure your liver is healthy, make sure, that you can properly clear your estrogens out of your body through detoxification is important. I mean, everything from like evaluate your alcohol intake, alcohol is a bully in the liver, and alcohol pushes everything to the back, which means that they don't get detoxified in the manner that you want them to, in a timely manner. So they go back out into circulation, and that can worsen cramps plus everything else. So if you're like a 1 or 2 glass of wine a day girl, maybe reel that in.
I love that. Okay. My takeaway from that is you should go to a doctor to get help and get tested. But at the same time, we can be empowered to do some things on our own while we're waiting for that doctor's appointment or whatever. Yeah. First of all, the diet is huge. Those oils that you said that they got rid of, those are full of omega-6s, which our bodies have too many of. And so when you say they switched to fish or cod liver oil or those other omega-3 things, that reduces our inflammation. So that's really powerful that women can do that. Women can change their beauty products with all those endocrine disruptors that are mimicking the estrogen. So I love that you stated that. So you started talking about detox. I love the topic of detox. I know we could talk hours on it. Tell us a little bit about the basics of detox, because when you started talking on Instagram about estrogen detox, I actually had some followers tell me like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize you had to detox estrogen. Like, I didn't realize you peed and pooped that out. So let's talk about detox in general, where we detox, and then let's throw in estrogen to that as well.
So detoxification happens in our body 24/7, 365. It never turns off. My joke is it doesn't take off Sunday. It doesn't take off your birthday. It doesn't stop for Christmas or Hanukkah, none of that. It happens 24/7, 365, because we as humans are exposed to internal and external chemicals, hormones, things, medications that we have to clear in one end and out the other, pretty much. Detoxification primarily starts in the liver, although you do have other cells in the body, like, for example, breast tissue, believe it or not, can help detoxify estrogen. And so it starts in the liver, and then you eliminate it. And so you eliminate it through the kidneys, which is why hydration is so important, and kidney health, or you essentially poop it out. So this is why bile health is important, gallbladder health, intestinal health, having regular bowel movements is important, because that's where you ultimately get rid of it. And that's how detoxification works. And yes, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, cortisol, everything goes through detoxification. Nothing in your body, ideally, hangs around forever. I mean, there are some things like heavy metals that kind of get stored places, but then they can be mobilized, and then you too can pull them out and detoxify them. But
Right.
your own estrogen, you have to clear out. It doesn't last forever.
Okay, so you can detox. I mean, your liver starts it, but you can also detox through your skin, through your lungs, and then, of course, peeing it out, things like that. So there are these other detox pathways. Tell the analogy that I love of yours about the bathtub and estrogen detoxing.
Yes. So think of a clawfoot bathtub, and it has to be clawfoot because I'm extra. So when you have an estrogen and your body is done with that estrogen, it primarily puts it in the liver first. And estrogen detox is generally a 3-step process. 1, 2, 3. So phase 1 detoxification happens in the liver, and I equate that to the water in your clawfoot bathtub. You can never turn it off, but you can adjust the water up. You can adjust the water down. You can adjust the kind of water coming into your clawfoot bathtub. When you go through phase 1 detoxification, estrogen gets converted into something called a metabolite because it has to go through this 3-step process. So first, it becomes this crazy metabolite that unfortunately can be pretty toxic. And the body knows this. So it's like, all right, we have to quick make you toxic as part of this process, but then we're going to quick neutralize you. And in your clawfoot bathtub, that's your drain. So how open is your drain? How closed is your drain? Is your drain clogged full of hair? Then now that you're neutralized, you can now get excreted. So estrogen in particular does go out either the kidneys or it goes out the intestines. And that's what we link like the sewer line. So the sewer line attached to your bathtub out of your house is literally the way that however you eliminate, that's how you get rid of estrogen. Estrogen doesn't get does not come out through the breath, and it does not come out through sweat. It's primarily through kidney and through stool. So in your clawfoot bathtub analogy, if your sewer line is broken, what happens? You overflow and ruin your bathroom. What happens if your drain is clogged? Same thing. You overflow and ruin your bathroom. And it can happen in your body. If you're not able to fully go down these pathways in the way that would be ideal, then you can struggle with estrogen type symptoms.
So what are some of these things clogging the drain, let's say, or the sewer system?
So let's start with the sewer system. So I explain it water, drain, sewer line, because that's actually the route of elimination. But when we work on treating it, we go in reverse. Just like in your house, we would treat the sewer line first before we'd go to the drain or the water. So sewer line, we want to make sure you're hydrated, make sure kidney health is good there. We want to make sure you're having regular bowel movements. We want to, if you're having gut issues, gas, bloating, constipation, see your practitioner. You might have to do some sort of poop in a cup, stool testing. I call it poop in a cup for science. And evaluate, do you have candida? Do you have parasites? Do you have bacteria? Is there something growing in there that maybe shouldn't? Are you eating foods that you shouldn't be eating and they're irritating your stomach and your intestines, but you can't help it? You love it so much, like cheese, and you eat it anyway. Well, those things are just constantly causing bloating, gas, inflammation. That's affecting your intestinal tract. So we start there. Eating foods that are, if you can, not everybody can, but like your probiotic and your prebiotic rich foods. So your maybe kimchi, right? Your fermented foods, or maybe like chicory root or jicama or Jerusalem artichoke. Like these are your prebiotic type foods. They help feed the good bacteria. Then we move up to the drain. So the drain, if we get nerdy for a second, the drain is run by a gene. So for those of you in genetic testing, it's run by a gene called COMT or COMT. Everybody freaks out about MTHFR, right? Everyone wants to know about their MTHFR. This is a different gene. MTHFR plays a tiny role, but it's COMT is the big player here. Magnesium is the cofactor.
Oh, imagine that.
Right? Magnesium is the cofactor.
So
zinc
many
is the backup.
women are low on that.
Yep. And zinc is the backup. So between magnesium and zinc, a lot of women are deficient. A lot of just humans are deficient in it. And that can affect the way that your drain works. Then when we go up to the water, when in that phase 1 detoxification, estrogen has a couple of pathways it can go down through. One of the pathways is considered, we call it the 4 pathway. It's considered a little more carcinogenic, more naughty. It can maybe cause issues with DNA, which we don't like. Our DNA doesn't like issues because that can lead to potentially things like cancer. So we eat foods like broccoli and kale and cauliflower because they help keep us on a different pathway and away from that naughty potential, maybe DNA damaging pathway. And so just by using like pre and probiotic foods, using the cruciferous vegetable foods, for phase 1, making sure you're having, regular bowel movements, you're getting your GI health, your intestinal health evaluated, avoiding the foods you probably know are triggers for you, but you love them and eat them anyway. Those, by doing just those simple steps, it can really just help how the flow of your detoxification. And it goes back to alcohol, right? Alcohol, I said, is a bully and pushes its way to the front of the liver, and it will affect the way you detoxify estrogen. So maybe reining in that alcohol habit, if you're using it to relax at night or calm down at night or be social, and you are suffering from hormonal symptoms, you're saying to yourself, I feel hormonal, my hormones are a mess. Just keep in mind alcohol plays a role there too.
Wow, I love all of that. I love that nutrition plays such a role. So many people think that food is just for our like calories in, calories out, and to give us the energy, and we're going to lose weight or not lose weight. So many forget or maybe don't understand the importance that it plays in our estrogen detox. It's amazing. And even just talking about hydration, over 75% of Americans are dehydrated. So that's crazy, then that's playing a part in hormonal stuff. So thank you for explaining all of that. I think it's fascinating. So,
and even the ingredients, like all the ingredients you talk about, all of those have to go through detoxification too. Parabens, phthalates, bisphenol, they too go through the liver. They too have to get excreted out. And so again, if you are struggling with sort of estrogen related symptoms and you are just starting your journey into reading ingredients, like they go hand in hand, and it's only going to help you in the end.
Wow. I love that. Okay. So let's talk about another topic that I get asked quite a bit about. So I've got a lot of followers who struggle with PCOS. Oh, yeah. So let's start at the basics. Tell my followers what that is for those that don't have it, and maybe what's contributing to it, what people can do to help it, things like that.
So PCOS is an acronym. It stands for polycystic ovary syndrome. And it's a interesting name because in it, it says polycystic ovary. And so a lot of women think, oh, I must have to have a lot of cysts on my ovaries. And you don't. Weirdly enough, there's a criteria that we follow, and it's 2 out of 3. So number 1, do you have cysts on your ovaries? And we evaluate that from an ultrasound, getting a pelvic ultrasound. Number 2, do you have high testosterone on testing or high DHEA and the symptoms associated? The symptoms are like cystic acne, especially on the jawline, hair growth in places we don't want. And I don't mean like the occasional chin hair that we all have. I mean like hair growth, like serious chin hair down the neck, around the nipple, on the belly. The technical term is called hirsutism. And then female pattern baldness. So women who are losing their hair at their temples, they're losing it in the back of their head. That's sort of the high testosterone umbrella. The third thing are cycle problems. So not ovulating, no cycles, long cycles, can't get pregnant. That's sort of the third criteria. And you only have to have 2 out of 3 to be considered PCOS.
Oh, okay.
So women can be listening and go, oh my gosh, I have all the testosterone symptoms, and my doctors told me I have high testosterone, and my cycle is weird. Some months it's 30 days, some months it's 80 days, some months I don't know when it's going to come. I have no idea. Having those 2 things can give you a diagnosis of PCOS. It's the number 1 endocrine sort of disorder around fertility problems. It's way more common, I think, than women know, or that their practitioner is working them up for.
Well, yeah, I hear so many women talk about it, that they're struggling with it much more now than I did years ago. So for those that do have it, do you have suggestions of what they should be working on to help
Yeah.
them?
So one of the most common instigators, I should say, of PCOS, there are a few different types, but the biggest, most common type is an insulin related. And we've all heard of insulin as it goes with our blood sugar. Insulin and glucose go together. And so insulin comes in and it turns on or binds to, again, like a lock and key, to make more testosterone. And so even if you didn't want to, your ovaries were like, no, no, no more insulin. In women with PCOS, they tend to have an excessive amount of insulin. And so it comes in and activates that testosterone. And so what I tell women is this is where understanding your blood sugar, understanding that the foods that you eat, the exercise that you do, the sleep that you get, the stress that you're under plays a big role in how you manage insulin. We find that women with PCOS already have this like an insulin that's got a mind of its own. It's like it's already higher maybe than yours or mine. And so then they have to be very diligent. They have to be very diligent when it comes to, like I said, those categories: sleep, food, stress management, exercise, what have you. Because just by getting the insulin down, just by improving that, can really help. One, the testosterone, this acne, the hair growth or hair loss, hair growth in places you don't want, hair loss on your head, and that can further help improve your cycle, get your cycle back, maybe get you ovulating. Again, just by affecting insulin, it can really affect the whole picture.
Okay, so cortisol can mess insulin.
It absolutely can.
So
Yes.
we've got to look at stress as well then.
Yes. So
And
I'm constantly, all women, but especially PCOS women, we can't get rid of stress. Obviously,
right.
2020 has proven that. But it's how we manage stress, right? What we do for ourselves. And I know the word self-care, hashtag self-care gets thrown out a lot. But I'm like, I don't care what you do. I don't care what it is that helps you de-stress. As long as it's working for you and obviously not hurting you, keep doing it. So if it is breathing exercises, if it is meditation, if it is, reading a book, if it's walking your dog, if it's, hanging out with friends, if it's sitting in the sun, whatever it is, listening to music, like whatever it does that helps bring you down and ground you again, I'm all about, because it's the little part throughout the day. Don't feel like you have to spend an hour in the bath if you don't have an hour in the bath. But if you have 5 minutes to do some deep breathing, if you have 5 minutes to read something funny, if you have 5 minutes to sit outside and get some fresh air, just those incremental 5 minutes through the day are what bring you back down to grounded level, bring you back down, make you feel happier and safe. And that can be really helpful.
I love that. And I know adaptogens can help with stress as well. So that's another thing that people can look into.
Yep. Adaptogens are great. They're an herbal family that do what they say they're going to do. They help you adapt.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Then also with PCOS, diet can play a huge factor, as you talked about the insulin, but inflammation as well.
Inflammation is one of the categories. So you can have an insulin related PCOS and you can also have an inflammation related PCOS. You can, of course, have both. But yes, so the more inflamed you are, again, you have these inflammation text messages. They're chemical messengers that go around and disrupt everything. When you have little fires all over your body, like that throws off your immune system, that throws off your endocrine system, this hormone system. It throws off. It affects every system. And so as a result, if you are already set up for PCOS, that inflammation can make not only your cortisol worse, but again, like it'll affect your hormone cascade from the brain down. It can affect your blood sugar and insulin. And so yes, inflammation can do it too. And people will often ask me like, well, I don't know what you mean by inflammation. Like, how do I know if I'm inflamed? So you can have obvious signs of I hurt, right? Like my knee hurts
Right.
all the time. My muscles hurt all the time. My head hurts. I get migraines. My intestines hurt. I have gas and bloating and I get stomach pains. And so trying to figure out the cause of that inflammation. But you can have a subtle inflammation that you may not quite realize yet. So you can have, like, you could have mold exposure and you're sort of fighting this simmering, fire, and you don't quite realize it yet. The chemical toxins, the parabens, the phthalates, the bisphenols, all these things, the metals, the pesticides, they can come in if they kind of like drip in through the day. You may not really realize like, oh my gosh, it could be driving low grade inflammation all the time. It's not like
Right.
my knee hurts, but it's more general gray area than that. Like, gosh, I just feel kind of tired and I feel kind of hormonal. And I don't feel kind of on my A game. And I don't have the memory I used to. It's sort of these just gray area symptoms that you think you're chalking, like maybe, oh, it must be age, or it might, it might be stress, which it could be. But at the same time, I don't want you to miss it. So inflammation can run a big gamut of ouch to just sort of that subtleness.
Yeah, almost knowing you don't even have it.
Yes, especially if you think it's like it becomes your new normal.
Right.
Where you're like, oh, I guess I used to describe myself as, like a 9 out of 10. And now more like a 5 or 6 out of 10. Like, okay, I guess that's my new normal. Like, you're not bad. You can still function and push yourself, but you're not the 9 or 10 that you used to be. And so we as humans adapt, and then we just try to push ourselves. Meanwhile, we have a low grade burning fire in places in our body. And so that's where I'm like, ooh, let's address this.
And inflammation actually your food has a ton to do with inflammation, reducing the sugar. Sugar, is such a culprit. Then you've got gluten, dairy for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So getting those out of your diet, I know, helps a ton. Being low on some of our minerals and main nutrients, vitamins can actually contribute to that. So I'm always like, oh, people, just up your fiber, up those cruciferous vegetables, get rid of that sugar. It will help tremendously, more so than people realize. So
we call it the standard American diet, right? The SAD diet, which is the diet of high processed food. Think of like packaged foods, the fast food, our energy drinks and sodas and cookies and muffins and all those things. That's what standard American diet. And I was lecturing to a group of practitioners in Australia a couple years ago. And I accidentally said to the group, blah, 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 standard American diet. And I went, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. What do you guys call it in Australia? And you didn't even hesitate. As a group, as a room, they said the standard American diet. And I was like, oh. We have a reputation.
Yes, we do. Oh,
so
shoot.
I say, just start, because people go, well, should I go paleo? Should I go keto? Should I go vegan? Should I, do all these things? I'm like, why don't we just start with the basics? Like, where are you at? What do you eat? And I think a lot of people realize when they're eating something, not that they shouldn't, because it's not like necessarily, it's bad, but, like I said earlier, if you're eating cheese every single day and every single day, cheese gives you massive gas or heartburn or bloating, like, come on now.
Then it's time to eliminate it. Exactly. Exactly.
Maybe only, really reduce it as best you can, use it as a treat. It's because it's only causing inflammation every time you eat it, and it. So just be mindful of that.
And people don't need to go on these trendy diets. They can just incorporate whole foods into their diet. Right. That's what I tell people. So,
right.
Okay. So moving on from PCOS, now endometriosis. That's the other one that a lot of my listeners struggle with. So again, maybe just tell my listeners what that is exactly, if there's things that can help this.
So PCOS is when you have hormone responsive tissue that should be in your uterus outside of your uterus. So it gets implanted often in the abdomen. So your uterus is like a container. It's like a pear. It's like this little container. And so things should stay in there unless it's, your period or you're having a baby, and then it comes out. Endometriosis, it has gotten other places. And so it'll be all around the intestines. It could be along the diaphragm. I've even had women who've had it externally on their labia. I've had women who've had endometrial tissue in their nose, and every time they get their period, they get a nosebleed, and you can see the little endometrial implants in there.
Oh, interesting.
And so it's very interesting, and it's so ridiculously not fair, because endometriosis can be devastating to some women. The debilitating cramps, the debilitating pain, because they're so inflammatory, immune, and hormone responsive, can warrant a lot of women will go in for surgery, right? They'll try to have this endometriosis scraped or lasered away. Some women will have hysterectomies because they just can't take it anymore. It can affect fertility. I mean, it can affect how comfortable sexes. I mean, it can affect how comfortable or uncomfortable clothes feel, like yoga pants may be too tight against the abdomen and it really hurts. I mean, it can just really be debilitating for a lot of women because this tissue is totally got a mind of its own.
And we don't know, or do we know the causes of endometriosis?
So it's highly up for debate. Yeah, unfortunately, it's highly up for debate what it could be. And so, in fact, I was talking with an endometriosis practitioner yesterday, and she said that in research that a lot of the cells were what did she call them? Zombie immune cells. I think that's what she called them. Senescent zombie immune cells that have implanted in places that they shouldn't, and they're hormone reactive. And I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. But there's some other theories out there as to what causes, like, was it in development, in basically when you were in utero, in your mother, did something happen, and as a result, you are now more prone compared to somebody else? Is it something that happened in puberty? Like, there's a lot of theories out there that are getting tossed around, so we don't quite have it nailed down as to why. But what worsens it, we have a much better grasp on.
So what does worsen it?
All the things we've talked about. So like estrogen can push things along. Estrogen out of balance, I should say. Estrogen inherently in itself is not bad. It's just when it's out of balance, especially with progesterone. Inflammation is a big driver. Chemicals, endocrine disruptors are a big driver. Gut health is a big driver because the intestines are all right there. And the endometrial tissue is often wrapping or intertwining itself around the intestines. And so intestinal health can really affect the endometrial health. And so just those few things can really make pain, cramping, fertility, everything so much worse, unfortunately. And the way to treat is all the exact same stuff we have talked about. It applies to so many things.
It does apply to a lot because it applies to PCOS, it applies to endometriosis, it applies to the bad cramping, the heavy periods, the moodiness, all of that. So it comes down to the nutrition and inflammation and the amount of antioxidants and minerals and vitamins in your body. So it is
chemicals, get rid of those.
The chemicals, the endocrine disruptors. So it's so important for women to understand this. So lumped in all of that, can we also lump infertility into that as well?
Yeah, no, remember, the one thing I will say about infertility is that, remember, it takes two.
True.
So he is just as important as she is when it comes to fertility. And I often will say women take on the brunt of infertility because they're the one who is actually going to carry the baby to term, right? And so women will go to the doctor and they will get worked up and, they will take on all of it. And then months may go down the road and their doctor or practitioner may say, oh, we should maybe evaluate his sperm. And sure enough, his sperm has some issues. And maybe if we'd evaluated him way in the beginning, then things would have gone a little faster than they were hoping. So I always say he is 50% of this equation. So we cannot forget his 50%. Like we want I always joke, we want a smart baby. We don't want a stupid baby. So we need smart sperm, just like we need a smart ovary, and we need to put the two of them together. So his health is just important. But yes, stress, endocrine disruptors, inflammation, gut health, everything we've talked about can go into infertility. PCOS, big cause of infertility. Endometriosis, big cause of infertility. And then outside of sort of those hormones, but like thyroid, hyperthyroidism can reduce fertility rates. And so make sure you get your thyroid checked, things like that. Vitamin D, get your vitamin D checked. Mineral status, like antioxidant status. These things can play a role in how you do and don't develop a hormone and how you do and don't maybe implant an embryo and become pregnant.
Right. So I have to tell you, I know infertility has so many root causes, and I wish there was just one solution and one answer for everyone, but there are thousands of reasons why you might be struggling with that. But I have to tell you, I have so many followers who will tell me, like, I have cleaned up my diet, added so many vegetables and fruits into it, and I've gotten rid of endocrine disruptors. And, they go through the whole list of things that they've cleaned up, and they'll say, we've been dealing with infertility for 3-4 years, and we just got pregnant on our own, and we're so excited. And so it is fun to hear those stories, because I know that those play a huge part and can really help someone. So,
and there's a lot of gray area in fertility, meaning if you don't get pregnant on your own and you go see your practitioner, your OBGYN or a fertility specialist, you kind of get thrown into the fertility circuit of medication, IUI, which is intrauterine insemination, all the way up to IVF. And there's no in between. Not very often is there a lot of workup for, well, let's see if you ovulate. Let's see what day you ovulate. Maybe you're trying the wrong day. We need to get you closer to right when you ovulate. Maybe you have a thyroid problem. Maybe your prolactin is a little bit too high. Maybe, cortisol. There's a lot of just reasons. It's same for him. Sperm quality, sperm health, they should swim forward. They should have one head and one tail. They should, they should all look the same. You should have enough volume so that they can, at least one of them can reach the egg. And so there's a lot that can be done for men as well, just as much as for the egg. And so I wish there was more empowerment, I guess, for women and fertility. Like, hey, look, while you're trying or before you try or in between trying, here are things you can do from a dietary, from a lowering inflammation, from a, getting healthy minerals and nutrients and antioxidants. And let's do these few key lab markers, because let's just do them now and get them out of the way. Why would we wait until you, God forbid, have a miscarriage? Is it so that's sort of my hope and dream as we move into fertility. I understand why. I had an IVF doctor tell me, he was like, well, why would we do all that? We control everything. We just do pills and we do injections and we do ultrasounds and we do retrievals and we do insertions and we just handle it all. Why would we do any of that other stuff? And I was like, oh,
well, and also it doesn't work for everybody. So sometimes they're not in control. And I love that you say empower yourself, because that's really what it is. Empower yourself, that the doctors can help you, but you can also do things on your own when you're not in his office or her office. So I love that you say that. Okay, talking about testing, tell my listeners about the Dutch test and what that is exactly.
It is an acronym. It stands for Dried Urine Test for Comprehensive Hormones. We do not test Dutch heritage. And so it is an at-home urine test that you pee on these strips of paper 4, if not 5 times during the day. And so it's kind of similar to women who've taken a pregnancy test or an ovulation test before, is that you just pee on the stick or pee in a cup and dip it into the stick, or dip the stick into the cup and let it dry, mail it back to the lab, and you get about 6 pages of information all about your estrogen, some of your estrogen detoxification, your progesterone, your testosterone, your DHEA, and the pathways they go down. Some of their pathways can, again, cause acne, right? Cause the hair growth on the face, the hair loss on the head. We give you a lot of information about cortisol. We give you melatonin. A lot of women want to know, and men want to know, why am I not sleeping? Should I take melatonin? I don't know about melatonin. We'll tell you what it is. We give you a B12 marker. We give you some B6 markers. We give you a glutathione marker. Glutathione is your most potent antioxidant, along with melatonin. Those are your big ones. And so it's nice to know some antioxidant status. And we also do a DNA damage marker. So it has this big fancy word. It's called 8-OHDG, but it is nice to know what's maybe potentially going on with your DNA, or maybe those who've had cancer or are in remission from cancer, they like to keep an eye on that marker as well. So it's a lot of info just by peeing on strips of paper 4 or 5 times during the day.
That is a lot of info. I didn't realize the DNA part. I need to do that. I know, because people say, well, I got blood work done at the doctor's office and my hormones are fine. And I want to tell them, well, that's a great first screening. I mean, that will tell you some basics, but the Dutch test obviously tells so much more.
It does. And like I said in the beginning, when you go to your practitioner and they do your blood work, make sure if you have a menstrual cycle, you get it tested on the correct day. Make sure you're trying to test in that second half, that luteal phase of your cycle. Oftentimes it's around day 19, 20, or 21. Because if you are on your period and you get your blood drawn, we miss out on progesterone. if they're looking at estrogen and progesterone, especially if you lead up to ovulation. So you could quote unquote look normal. You may be in the range, but you're not in the range for the time of the cycle we're actually looking for. The ranges are very, very different. And so if you do get blood work, if you go that route, it is a screen. So it's a great start. Make sure at least you're on the right day of your cycle.
The right day. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the Dutch test, do they have to get it at a doctor's office, or can they order it online?
They do not. You can order it online, and they get shipped to you. You mail it back to the lab, and the results come to you. Now, we are a lab. We don't do any interpretation. So you will either hopefully be somewhat savvy in the hormone world and understand what's going on with these hormones, or then you will probably need to find a practitioner to explain the test for you. And we do have a find a provider link on our website. So you can type in your zip code or your city or state, and then you can get an idea for all the practitioners who do it. And thankfully now, so many practitioners do telehealth. And so you may not even be in the same state as the expert you're looking for, or maybe somebody you follow on social media, Instagram, who does Dutch testing. You can just do a telemedicine visit and go over your test results.
That's so great. I love that people can just do this on their own and really empower themselves with their knowledge of what's really happening in their body. I think it's so important that women really know what's going on. So thank you so much. Thank you for explaining hormones and explaining it with PCOS and endometriosis and cramping and infertility. My followers, I know, will learn so much from this podcast. My takeaway from it is that, like I said before, is nutrition plays a big part and endocrine disruptors play a huge part, and that we can do so much more in our home than maybe we once thought. Maybe we thought we just had to do exactly, or couldn't do anything without a doctor. Of course, the doctor is great to show us what's going on, but we can do so much on our own. So thank you for teaching that.
Absolutely.
I always end each podcast with, what is your best ingredient in life? What have you found to be the best?
The best ingredient in life. So literally my literal favorite ingredient, I'll tell you my literal and then my like emotional ingredient to light. So literal is cinnamon, just because of cinnamon's impact on blood sugar and how it can be really helpful at blood sugar regulation. So for people who, if you have like pre-diabetes or even insulin resistance or diabetes, you've probably read about cinnamon. So I put cinnamon on literally everything. One, I love the taste, and two, for blood sugar help. And then my emotional ingredient for life is find joy. There is a speaker who talks about emotional levels and how they affect our health, meaning like anger, resentment, those are at the bottom, right? And then we move up the ladder of emotions and we get brighter and lighter and higher up. And according to her, healing happens at joy. Healing happens at the vibration of joy. So I even have that behind me. Healing happens at joy because, and you don't have to have like hours of joy, but even like your best friend sends you the funniest meme ever, like that's joyful. You know, your dog is being super cute with its toy. That's joyful. Being with your family at night all together on the couch, that's joyful. I mean, it can be big things and it can be little things. If the emotion is joy, then that's when healing starts. And I love that.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That is so great, because I'm always talking about healing, but rarely do I ever talk about joy. I'm going to start talking about joy. Oh my goodness. Yes. That is so great. Also, cinnamon. I love that. We're having chili tonight for dinner, so I'm going to dump cinnamon in it because
I love cinnamon and chili.
Yeah, it's really good. So I love that. Thank you so much. Tell my followers where they can find you, where they can learn more from you.
I hang out on Instagram with you. I am at dr.Carrie Jones, and everything I do is educational on there. So I do a lot of hormones, primarily female, just a little bit of male, and a lot of cortisol, a lot of mitochondria. So that's where I am.
You guys, she is such a wealth of knowledge. Go follow her. I have learned so much from you. I love how you just break things down. I love that you're trying new products. I loved one post that you were talking about like different beauty products that you were trying and asking people for suggestions on other beauty products. And so I love that you are bringing the real life stuff to hormones. And so thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for everything you're trying to empower women to understand and know. And thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, it was such an honor. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you to everyone who's listening.
Thank you so much for listening. Remember to subscribe to the Just Ingredients podcast to learn more about your health and good ingredients to life. Plus, get daily tips at just.ingredients on Instagram.